let's start with the next concept of object-oriented programming. In the last session, we had designed smart program using classes and object, and inside the class member function definition and outside the class member function definition. So today we are going to revise the concept of member function definition ways, and in what is inline function, utility function, and accessor function. If you like my video, do subscribe and like the channel. Subscribe the channel and like the video. Thank you. So this was the assignment which was given in the last video related to designing a class student with its roll number, fees as data member, and set roll number and display student data as member functions. We were asked to create two different student objects and set their roll numbers and fees and display their data. So here lies the solution for the same. We have to include IO stream, then declare the class student. In the private section, we have declared the data members, roll number and fees. In the public section, we have taken void display student and void set roll number. Now display student is declared, but set roll numbers is defined. Defined means you do not have a semicolon after its name. It's just definition, whereas display student is declared. That is why we have a semicolon after its specification. Then in the set roll number, we are taking the roll number and fees from the user and closing the class. Now display student is just declared but not defined. We are going to define it outside the class. While defining outside the class, as already discussed, you should have a return type, void, then class name, student, scope resolution operator, and function name, display student. So here comes that, and inside that the definition of the displaying of the student data is there, cout roll number and fees. So this gets completed. Now what main part is remaining is the main function. Before that, you should understand that display student is defined outside, hence it need to be declared inside, whereas roll number is defined inside the class, hence it does not need to declare, you need to directly define that function. Now inside the main function, to access the set roll number and display student, we create two different objects, S1 and S2, which belong to the student class, and to access it we make the use of S1 dot set roll number, S1 dot display student. Similarly, we can use another object S2 and access S2 dot set roll number, S2 dot display student. So this is how we are declaring the class and defining the objects and accessing the members using the object. This video is going to talk about main, that is inline functions. Inline function, now there's a question in all, why to use inline function. So before going for inline function, let's recall what is a function. Whenever a function is being called, what happens? Major objective of the function becomes to save the memory and to save the time. So whatever happens is, every time whenever a function is being called, it takes a lot of extra time in executing the task. What extra task it has to do is jumping to the address of the function which is being called, execute the function over there and come back again to the main function. So this is an extra time which is taken by the functions. So to reduce the execution time and to make the execution time faster, we make the use of inline function. Let's see that with a short story. Now consider there is a teacher and there are a number of students. Now a teacher wants to check the homework of all the students. So she calls one of the students, that is Rohan. Rohan says, yes ma'am. What can I do? Now here there are two ways that a teacher wants to check the homework. One way, that is teacher will go where Rohan is sitting, or second way, Rohan will come where teacher is sitting and get his homework checked. Now usually this happens that teacher and students are there. In the current scenario, time has changed. Now here consider teacher as main function and Rohan as a user defined function. So what usually happens is that teacher goes where Rohan is seated, and if the teacher goes where Rohan is seated, there are so n number of students with whom the teacher has to deal with. That is, the teacher's burden may increase of going to each one's of place, checking their homework, come to the back and go to the other and check it again. So it is becoming very burden for a teacher. So it is better that if Rohan's task is small, that is, he just has to bring his book, check the homework and go back again. So that is better, that if Rohan's task is small, he goes where teacher is seated, get it checked and come back again. So this is an inline function analogy. In inline function, what happens whenever main function calls an inline function, the inline function, the control doesn't transfer from the main function to the inline function, whereas the inline function code, whatever is there, gets replaced at the time of the function call. It gets replaced in the main function, it executes in the main function itself, and the result is being displayed. So your control doesn't transfer from the address of main function to the function which is called. That is the analogy. So here when the inline function is called, whole code of the inline function gets inserted or substituted at the point of the inline function call. So this reduces much more time and the execution becomes faster. That is why the inline function can be seen in the form of a program. You have a similar program which we have seen. We write roll number P's, display student, set roll number. Now to make a function inline, you have to write a keyword inline before its definition, like inline void student, scope resolution operator, display student. So here the display student function becomes inline, and since it becomes inline, what will happen whenever display student is going to be called? The display student's code will get replaced at its function call, at the place where the function is being called, and thus reducing the execution time. This is the display student. Now display student, as it is defined outside the class, need to be declared inside. And now set roll number by default becomes inline, because each function which is defined inside the class is by default inline. So remember, dear students, two things, that inline function, if defined inside the class, it becomes inline, any function which is defined inside the class becomes by default inline function. And to make a function inline explicitly, specifically, you have to write inline keyword before its definition. Now calling is same as one dot set roll number s1 dot display student, and s2 dot set roll number s2 dot display student. So here what happens, at place of s2 dot display student, the function code gets replaced and the control doesn't transfer to the display student address. So this is the solution and advantage of inline function. So inline function reduces the call overhead. One thing which we have to remind, that inline function should have a very small code. It should not have a for loop. Its execution should be much more faster, and all functions which are defined inside the class are by default inline functions. Next function which we are going to see, that is accessor and utility function. Any functions which can read or display the data are known as accessor function. Apart from that, the functions which test the truth or falsity of any condition, where you have just return true or return false, this type of statement, those functions which are often called as predicate functions, are also known as access functions. Second function, that is utility function, is not a part of class's public interface, but it is just known as an helper function. That is, it helps the other member function to do the operation. Remember that utility function is never declared in the public interface. It is a private member function, and it supports the operation of the other class's public member function. These are not to be intended to be used by the clients of the class, but they are generally can be used by the friends. We'll see this concept in the next coming video. What is a helper function and how to use those functions. So this video we have revised about the class member function definition inside the class and outside the class, and also understood the concept of inline function and utility and accessor function. Thank you for watching this video. Have a nice day.